Welcome. It's my privilege to call this hearing to order to review the USDA reorganization proposal. I welcome our witness, Judge Stephen Vaden, Deputy Secretary of Agriculture. I appreciate your ability to appear before the committee on such short notice and the opportunity to engage thoughtfully on the future of USDA and how it will continue to efficiently serve our farmers, ranchers, and rural communities. Despite being at the helm for less than 6 months, Secretary Rollins has already made a significant and positive impact on the agriculture sector and rural America. I appreciate her commitment to serving our nation's farmers, ranchers, and foresters. She's worked tirelessly to implement emergency economic assistance and supplemental disaster relief passed in December to ensure that American farmers and ranchers receive emergency assistance to keep their family farms in operation and to help them recover from natural disasters. She's championed provisions that bolster the farm safety net, crop insurance, research, or animal health infrastructure, and trade promotion programs Congress delivered in the One Big Beautiful Bill. The Secretary has also taken action to defend American livestock against the growing threat of New World screwworm, as well as successfully reined in the highly pathogenic avian influenza outbreak that has significantly impacted poultry, flocks, and dairy operations across the U.S. She continues to be a voice for American agriculture and those who feed, clothe, and fuel our nation. Last week, Secretary Rollins announced a major reorganization of USDA. I appreciate the Secretary's emphasis on improving effectiveness, accountability, enhancing services, reducing bureaucracy, and cutting waste. I support those goals. As we examine the proposal, we need to fully understand its implications for the people USDA serves, especially how reorganization will affect USDA's boots on the ground, presence in rural America, and delivery of essential services. From its founding, USDA has been essential to American life, supporting farmers and ranchers, stewarding natural resources, investing in rural development, and advancing innovation in food and agriculture. As the department evolves to meet 21st century challenges, it's important that any organization enhances its ability to deliver on these commitments. I share the Secretary's desire to ensure USDA operates efficiently, is a good steward of taxpayer dollars, and meets the needs of agriculture and rural America. We must also prioritize what matters most to producers in rural communities: service, responsiveness, and results. USDA is often the most visible face of the federal government in rural America. That presence, whether through FSA offices, conservation staff, or rural development programs, needs to be preserved and empowered. As we review this plan, I look forward to learning more about how this proposal strengthens the USDA's ability to deliver on the ground, support implementation of the Farm Bill, and serve as a reliable partner to people it was created to support. Deputy Secretary Vaden, I recognize you've only been in the department for a little over 3 weeks after being sworn in on July 7th, so you were involved but not that involved. A lot's gone on in the last 3 weeks, I'm sure. But again, we want to thank you for coming on very, very short notice, which was due to the fact that hopefully we'll get out of here in the next few days for a few weeks. So again, thank you for being here to testify. I now turn to our ranking member, Senator Klobuchar.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for working with me to hold this hearing at the last moment. And the reason it's short notice is because the administration put out a half-baked plan with no notice and without consulting agricultural leaders. As we start this discussion, let me be clear, I support efforts to make USDA work. But I don't think getting rid of 15,000 employees, which has already happened because of early buyouts, because of firing people, because of everything else that's happened, is good for agriculture. I don't think that these tariffs, which have dried up markets when our farmers and ranchers are already working on thin margins, have been good for agriculture. We have a half-baked agenda that will almost certainly result here in worse services for farmers, families, and rural communities. Coordinated action and influence for rural America and agriculture does not mean just being close to where the producers are. That's true. We have that with ag. We have 90% of the employees already out in the field. But what you guys are planning on doing or proposing to us is to take that other 10% and break them down and send them to 5 different hubs, including a state that I would say is not in the top 10 for agriculture, not even close. It also means having staff in a place, if we want to do our jobs right, where they can meet with their peers in other agencies and interact with key stakeholder groups and members of Congress. Whittling down USDA's resources to do this crucial work puts rural America at a disadvantage when they don't have people in the room where it happens. And we have differences across the aisle, but I think every one of my colleagues understands that you need people that can meet with you. You need people that can go over to the White House so that you don't have people that don't have the interests of rural America in mind making all the decisions. I am extremely concerned about the harm that this reorganization will have on the USDA's research. The previous relocation of the Economic Research Service and the National Institute of Food and Agriculture was nothing short of a disaster. A 2023 report by the Government Accountability Office, those reports are used by both Democrats and Republicans to make their points, underscores the threat that these short-sighted actions have on USDA stakeholders. GAO explicitly stated, based on this much smaller relocation, that ERS produced fewer key reports and that NIFA, known as NIFA, took longer to process grants because of the relocation. Why would we want that right now when we've already lost 15,000 employees, when farmers are already suffering, when we have these tariffs walloping them? This means farmers didn't get timely economic information and researchers were left waiting for critical research funding. This reorganization plan would create similar chaos, but on a much grander scale, which seems to be what this administration is repeatedly about. Vacating long-standing research labs, including the very lab where USDA began work on sterilized flies to combat screwworms, and pushing researchers out of federal service will threaten the innovation that our farmers demand and need to combat animal and plant disease. Just this year, 1,600 employees have already left USDA research agencies, and you want to make it even smaller. When we're trying to compete with other countries, when we know that so many of our human-based diseases actually start with animals all around the world, when we know that farming and ranching has been the jewel of America's economy. I hope that today's discussion will shed light on the effects this proposal will have on USDA's ability to respond to wildfires, administer critical nutrition programs, protect civil rights, and meet the needs of our farmers. And before I close, I want to point out that this reorganization plan, as I noted at the beginning, was developed without input of Congress or the very stakeholders USDA aims to serve. It is unacceptable that we learned about this proposal just minutes before it was announced. The first months of this administration do not inspire confidence, given the months of freezes, cancellations, unfreezes, firings, hiring back, lease terminations, firings, and subsequent attempts to rehire veterinarians, farm loan officers, and other critical positions. It has injected uncertainty at a time when USDA's customers look for certainty and trust. I did not vote for you, Mr. Deputy Secretary, but I did think that you would go in, based on your experience, and be able to do things that would actually help rural America. And I actually took you at your word when you had pledged to work with us on things that would help. That's not what happened here when we had absolutely no notice of what you were going to do.
We will now introduce our witness, Deputy Secretary of Agriculture Stephen Vaden. Deputy Secretary Vaden was confirmed earlier this year, and prior to his confirmation was a judge on the International Court of Trade. During the first Trump administration, he served as General Counsel of the Department of Ag. Deputy Secretary Vaden is a native of Union, Tennessee, where his family has resided for many generations. Again, we thank you very much for being here this morning, and you are now recognized.
Chairman Bozeman, Ranking Member Klobuchar, committee members, thank you for your invitation to come here today to talk about our reorganization plan. I've already submitted my testimony to you in writing. I don't believe reading it to you today would be a good use of our time. Instead, I'd like to focus on some facts and begin to answer some questions that have arisen. First, the Secretary's plan proposes relocating 2,600 employees from the National Capital Region to 5 hubs around the country. Let's put that number in perspective, shall we? From January 2021 to January 2025, the Biden administration, 2,200 employees left Washington, D.C. There was no congressional notice. There was no outcry. There was no committee hearing. For more than 1,700 days, extending well beyond any fair definition of the COVID pandemic, USDA was on a maximum telework footing. Both career and political leadership rarely set foot in USDA's headquarters. Staff moved away from the National Capital Region. They expected not to be asked to return. There was no congressional notice. There was no outcry. There was no committee hearing. As was earlier noted, 90% of USDA's current staff reports to work outside the National Capital Region. We propose to add approximately 2.5% to that number, 2,600 people. With respect, it is insulting to suggest that the more than 90% of USDA employees who clock in every day outside of Washington, D.C. are somehow less important and less vital than the people who do the same in Washington, D.C. Everyone's work makes the department. The heart of USDA is in the field, and the maximum number of people possible should report to work there. Speaking of where USDA employees report to work, USDA has a total of 4,754 facilities at which its employees report to work every day. The Secretary's proposal calls for closing exactly 4 of those 4,754 places of employment. And how did we determine which ones to close? We followed congressional intent. Earlier this year, on January the 4th, President Biden signed into law the Use It Act. It passed this body, the Senate, 97-1. And in case you're wondering, the one senator who voted against it doesn't sit on the Agriculture Committee. What does the Use It Act require? All buildings leased or owned by a government agency should be at least 60% occupied. Not a single one, not a one, of USDA's buildings in the National Capital Region meet this congressionally mandated 60% occupancy rate. What does the Use It Act say if you fail to meet it? The agency should choose to consolidate and vacate to get into a footprint that does meet the 60% threshold. That is exactly what USDA is choosing to do. Follow the law this body passed. And finally, a note on timing. I understand the consternation some members of this committee have with the fact that they received notification at the same time that USDA's employees did. There was a thought behind that, and that thought was this. The employees are the ones who are most directly affected by the Secretary's decision. Out of common courtesy and respect, they should hear that decision from the Secretary first and not from a leak that originates from somewhere else. USDA's entire focus of its reorganization efforts has been on voluntary decisions by employees. The Secretary has been frank with our employees about what our budgetary numbers require and what the administration's expectations are so that those employees can make the best decisions for themselves and their families. That will continue to be the department's guideposts. We understand the need to work with Congress. The 30-day notification period required by law ensures that now is the time for us to receive feedback from stakeholders, from our employees, and from members of Congress as well. I look forward to taking your questions.
First, I'd like to enter into the record the memo that was provided, SM 1078-015, for the committee record without objection. Can you tell us a little bit about, we have the 30-day period. What kind of timeline are we looking at after that? What's, as we go forward?
Well, first, we have a 30-day period of consultation.
Right.
That's required by statute, and we're going to honor every day of that. As schedules allow, both the Secretary of Agriculture and myself will travel to all 5 proposed hub locations. We will be engaging in further conversations with USDA's 8 mission areas, as well as their agency leadership, on connecting the right functions of each agency and mission area to a particular hub location. We also need to finalize our conversations with the General Services Administration, which manages, of course, the entire real estate footprint of the federal government, regarding the leases and facilities that they have available in these 5 regions for USDA employees to move into. Following those discussions, we will issue a finalized, phased timeline for the implementation of the Secretary's plan. This will include union notifications where required by contractor law, employee notifications, including, where needed, options provided by VERA and VISIP. We will then initiate the vacature of the National Capital Region space in a phased plan, as we have laid out in the buildings we have intended to vacate. And of course, throughout this process, we will consult not only with our employees and our stakeholders, but Congress as well.
I think the thing that we're all concerned about, I know you all are, and certainly we as a committee are, is the ability to serve customers in rural communities and the agriculture community that really is in a difficult situation now. I'm very proud of the work that we've done, as I mentioned in our opening statement. But can you tell us about how the plan is going to improve programs that support Americans who live in rural areas as we go forward?
It's going to allow us to build the next generation of USDA leadership. Simply put, the hardest problem that any federal agency faces, and this is not limited to the Department of Agriculture, is talent retention. The cost of living here in Washington, D.C. is prohibitive. And who do I have in mind when I'm thinking about what I want for the next USDA leadership? Well, there's someone you all know here who is the story that we're trying to seek and continue. That's my friend Ralph Linden, who's sitting back here behind me. He's currently our acting general counsel. Ralph started his tenure with USDA in 1982, which also happens to be the year I was born. So I know he's worked at USDA for 43 years. Ralph moved to a neighborhood in suburban Virginia. He bought a home with his wife and started a family. Ralph has worked his way up from the lowest of line attorneys in the Office of General Counsel to the top position at the department, acting general counsel. His institutional knowledge of legal issues that have come across USDA's desk is unparalleled. When he moved into that home in suburban Virginia, all of his neighbors were government employees. Today, all of the homes in Ralph's neighborhood sell for 7 figures. There are no government employee neighbors of his. They are all dual professional, private sector, doctors, lawyers, lobbyists, your typical DC types. No government employees to be found. The future Ralph Lindens of the world can't buy a home in Washington, D.C. when the average price is 7 figures. They can't start a family. They can't go on the journey that Ralph has had. But they can do that in Raleigh, North Carolina. They can do that in Indianapolis, Indiana. They can do that in Kansas City, Missouri. They can do that in Fort Collins, Colorado. And yes, they can do that in Salt Lake City, Utah, which was why one of our principal considerations for where to put our regional hubs was the cost of living. We want people to come to USDA for a career, to start a family, and to stay with us. And unfortunately, given the cost of living in the National Capital Region, the Ralph Lindens of the world can no longer do that in the District of Columbia.
Very good. Senator Klobuchar.
Thank you. It is apparent that USDA did not consult with or even bother to notify Congress with this plan. And I'd like to know, did you consult with the American Farm Bureau before releasing this plan, the organization that represents so many of our farmers and ranchers?
Senator, the Secretary's memorandum was the first step, not the
Could
final
you
step.
answer? So you did not. Is
This
that
is
the
the
answer?
beginning of
Could
the
you just
consultation
answer yes or no? Did
not
you
the end.
consult with the Farm Bureau before releasing this?
The consultation process has just begun.
You did not, for the record. Did you consult with the Farmers Union, the National Farmers Union, before releasing this plan? When? What do you mean? Yes or no?
No, because the consultation process has just begun.
Did you consult with or submit this plan to the Office of Management and Budget before this?
A plan was submitted to the Office of Management and Budget, and they are aware of our current plan.
1,600 employees have left USDA's research agencies. USDA fired many researchers, including those working on avian flu, only to later backtrack. USDA is extremely delayed in setting out funding for competitive research programs this year, as so many of my colleagues know. To me, these actions completely undermine agricultural research, just as we're seeing more and more animal diseases that are used against us in trade arrangements that hurt our producers. Senator Smith and I have seen the horrific effects of avian flu. Secretary Vaden, USDA's reorganization plan would vacate USDA research labs and eliminate or consolidate offices for the Ag Research Service, the Agricultural Statistics Service. Do you believe that vacating research sites, eliminating offices, and losing researchers will improve outcomes for farmers who depend on this research?
Senator, 91 of 94 ARS research labs are unaffected by the Secretary's memorandum. Further, the Secretary's memorandum states in its plain text that what will go on in Beltsville will take place over a period of years and in a way that does not interfere with any ongoing research. And with regard to where researchers are, I think it's important to note, as you have referenced ERS and NIFA multiple times, that during the prior administration, nearly all of the hiring that took place in those agencies was done virtually, which is to say, the employees that were hired reported to no office other than their own kitchen, and some of them who did have offices in the National Capital Region not only never reported to those offices, but moved hundreds of miles away.
Mr. Vaden, I know you will be surprised at this, but I am not interested in relitigating the pandemic right now, which spanned 2 administrations, the Trump administration, part 1, and the Biden administration. What I want to talk about is now. Do you think that these actions are actually going to make us more competitive when it comes to ag, more competitive when we are dealing with research issues across the world? And how will you ensure that critical research projects will not suffer?
Absolutely I do, because on a government salary, government employees cannot afford to start a quality life in Washington, D.C., but they most certainly can in Indianapolis, Indiana.
Mr. Vaden, USDA's
out of D.C.
USDA's reorganization plan calls for closing every one of the existing food and nutrition service offices, both the headquarters and regional offices, and relocating those employees as well. As you know, these programs are food nutrition assistance, which took a major hit in this recent budget bill, well, except for the states that have the highest error rates. It serves tens of millions of customers every year, including over 40 million SNAP recipients. The FNS has a huge task ahead implementing the bill with these SNAP cuts. Huge transformation that we have decided to embark on. How can, not we, you, how can USDA possibly ensure the integrity of the billions of dollars it is responsible for overseeing with this change and closing down all the offices? Can you provide the committee with a breakdown of staff losses by function? And given our shared interest in the program integrity, I'd like to know how many staff who have left positions related to financial management, program integrity, or management review of nutrition programs.
Senator,
could you answer that?
2 points in response to that. Number one, I'd be happy to get you those numbers, but your supposition that all food and nutrition service employees will be leaving the National Capital Region is incorrect. Every agency and every mission area under the Secretary's plan will have representation and officials in Washington, D.C. And as I know you know well, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program is primarily administered by the states. And so what USDA's role is to ensure the states are properly administering the program. It makes sense to move the employees whose job it is to oversee the states into these states that they are overseeing, rather than keeping them in Washington, D.C.
So I've just had a different experience in my own state office, in my own work. I think, like, when the work of our office is constituent services, I have one person in each of the areas, but I've kept people together that have to interact to make decisions and do hard work together and figure out when the constituents call, and we have a number of them with veterans concerns or a number of them with adoption concerns. Having that kind of interaction and having that kind of expertise in one space, which in the case of USDA, already 90% of their workforce, as we both agreed on, is dispersed. But one thing we haven't discussed, given the raging forest fires we've seen recently, given the details included in the USDA's reorganization plan, and as you know, your budget proposed, the President's budget proposed, moving wildland fire operations out of the U.S. Forest Service to a new federal wildland firefighting agency housed in Interior. There is also reporting that the administration is considering moving parts of the USDA's Rural Development Agency to the Small Business Administration. Is the USDA still considering moving parts of the Forest Service and Rural Development to other cabinet agencies? When you're looking at only 10% of the workforce already in one place, and you want to half that, and then you want to move away all the wildfire, are you trying to decimate this agency, Mr. Baden? Are you trying to do what they're doing to the Department of Education? That's a question I want answered. What about the Forest Service? Are you still pursuing getting rid of that as well?
Senator, the President's budget proposal is before this body. It speaks for itself. It calls for the centralization of all federal wildfire fighting capabilities. That is a proposal that predates this administration, and I think it's one that should be taken seriously. As it goes to the Forest Service, I want to make certain to state for the record that the Secretary's memorandum, again in its plain text, specifically notes that the Forest Service's Fire Safety Lab will not be moving and is protected in this reorganization.
Okay, last question. Why did you tell people to resign and fire them and then tried to rehire them?
Senator, we don't have the money in our budget to pay for all of the employees that were hired in the prior administration. Former Secretary Vilsack, in comments to AgriPulse, admitted as much just last week.
So you're saying that you thought it was a good idea to fire them and then try to rehire them, the same people for the same positions, and you lost a whole bunch of them, veterinarians and researchers.
Senator,
so you think that was a smart way to handle it?
Terminated as a result of the DRP.
All right, I'm done.
Senator Hoven.
Deputy Secretary, thanks for being here today. I support finding cost savings where you can. I support the idea of moving people out of the D.C. area and out into the field and closer to the farmer. And of course, the ultimate goal has to be better service to our farmers and ranchers across ag country. I think the key here, though, that I want to talk about with you is that when the Trump administration went through this process during the president's first term and moved NIFA and ERS to Kansas City, there was a process. We had a process where the administration worked with Congress, and we went through the options. People could request being included, and there was a give and take, and you know, that's kind of what we're looking for, I think, this time. And I understand your point, okay, you wanted to bring something out. But I think the key is that we know that there's an ability to work with you on this to effectuate the things we talked about, the cost savings, better service, those kind of things. And so, and it also involves funding. So I chair Ag Approps. It's going to change your funding needs and where those allocations have to go. And we're hoping that, I mean, Republicans have cleared the Ag Approps bill to be on the Senate floor now, and I'm hoping with our colleagues across the aisle, we're working on that right now. So it's very timely. So this process is important. And as we look at the 5 sites, like from my part of the world, there's nothing within 600 miles of us, from Fargo, North Dakota, for example. And we're in the heart of ag country. So my question to you is, where are we in this process? And one other point I'd make before you respond is that Secretary Rollins was in front of our Ag Approps Committee, and I specifically said, hey, will you work with us? Because we talked about this reorganization effort, and I said, we support the goals, but we want it to be a process where you work with Congress, with the Senate, both the Authorizing Committee and the Appropriations Committee on it, and we achieve those results together. And I think that'll help garner a lot more support for the effort. So I want to know where, and I'll be up to see you later today, we can talk some more, but I want to know where we are in this process so we can accomplish just what I'm laying out and what I think, you know, the Secretary and I had talked about previously.
Well, Senator, as I stated in my opening remarks, this is the first step, not the final step. We're now accepting feedback, and we want to hear from you, and I know I'll be speaking with you later this afternoon. I look forward to that meeting. We couldn't put offices everywhere, and we learned some lessons from the ERS NIFA relocation in Term 1. And one of the most important lessons that we learned was, instead of looking all over the map, literally, for where we should go if we're looking to relocate, the first thing we should do is see where we already are and where we already have office space available and a core set of employees. That's one of the reasons, for example, that Fort Collins, Colorado jumped to the top of our list. When we look at USDA's footprint in the state of Colorado, we not only have all of the employees in Fort Collins, but in nearby Lakeland and Denver. That just formed a natural core, particularly with Forest Service equities, that made sense for us to go ahead and build on. And there's a similar story when you look at Kansas City and when you look at Raleigh, North Carolina, and the other hubs as well. So that's what we were looking at. And while our plan does not have an office in North Dakota, one thing I will note is that nearly all of these hubs are closer to North Dakota than Washington, D.C. And so while we couldn't put a location in every state, we are bringing these hubs closer to the American people that we serve. And if you look at a map, it's kind of neat how it worked out that they're pretty evenly spaced across the center of the country, from Raleigh all the way over to Salt Lake.
Well, and again, the things we talked about, moving cost reductions, moving people out of D.C., closer to the farm country, better service for farmers and ranchers. I mean, we can kind of go through and debate all the things you brought up as to each of the hubs. For example, what's magic about 5 hubs? How much agriculture is there in the state of Utah? We can go through all those things, and whether, in fact, it's actually easier or better for our farmers and our ranchers in North Dakota, given the 5 hubs you've selected. But there's a difference between you selecting 5 hubs on your own and saying, okay, we're at the start of the plan, but this is the plan, and we're going to talk about it, but this is the plan. That's different than if we work together and come up with a plan that people have had input, they've been fairly heard and fairly treated, and it may be different than 5 hubs, and it may be different than these locations, and it may be different in form and function, but it is something that ultimately this Congress has something to say about, both from an authorizing standpoint and certainly from an appropriation standpoint. So is this a process where we're still going to work together on an outcome, or is this an outcome that we're now just going to talk about, but it's a fait accompli?
Senator, if you read the memorandum, it has built-in flexibility. The memorandum lays out a vision, but then there is a line in that memorandum which says the vision and the plans laid out here can change.
Good.
And the Secretary delegated authority to me to make changes where needed.
Then we look forward to working with you on it.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you.
Senator Bennett.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for having this hearing. Mr. Baden, thanks for being here. I'll prove it to you later, but I have long called for the idea of trying to relocate people from Washington, D.C. to parts of the country, partly to get out of the insulation of this place, partly to just be closer to, in this case, producers, but others as well. So philosophically, that's where I've been. And I say I have to prove it to you because you just said Fort Collins had risen to the top of your list. And I wonder if you could describe a little bit what the intention is for that hub in Fort Collins. We're pleased to have that announcement for our state. And then I'll ask you some follow-up questions. You mentioned fire. You mentioned the Forest Service equities as part of that too. So if you could just elaborate on that, I'd appreciate it.
Well, as you know, Senator, in your state of Colorado, the Forest Service already has many employees spread between Fort Collins, Lakeland, and Denver. We want to build on that. It makes sense for more of the Forest Service to be located actually close to the forest it's in charge of managing. And I know there's been some questions by certain members of the committee about Salt Lake City. That's also what brought Salt Lake City into the mix. What it can offer the Forest Service, and in particular, what it can offer the Forest Service's aviation assets as it looks in whatever Congress decides about the administration's plan regarding centralizing wildfire efforts to fight the forest fires that unfortunately we know that the Forest Service will be charged with fighting. Now, what other agencies may join the Forest Service in Fort Collins? Those lists haven't been finalized. And partly that's because we need to consult with the employees and we need to consult with the mission areas and agencies now that they know what we think makes the most sense to see how they want to adapt their footprint to these locations.
I think those consultations are important. I would also say it'll be very important to consult with the local communities as well. The research, the world-class research that's done at Colorado State University is an example of something that I think the department can build on, that I hope that if you and the secretary are going to be out there, that you are able to make the time to meet with the people on the ground at the university and around that ecosystem to be able to try to apply as much imagination as possible to the work that you're trying to do.
Well, Senator, we join with you in wanting to build in every force multiplier that we can. Either Brooke or I will visit Fort Collins, and we will give you a heads up before we go out there. So if you wish to join us, you or your staff are more than welcome to, as well as your colleague in the Senate and the House. And that's one of the reasons why we think this plan is such a good idea, why you have laid out. When we get people into the field with the people whom they serve, you just mentioned Colorado State University, it's easier to collaborate and it's easier to multiply efforts. And it's that in-person collaboration that we're trying to spark.
And I was actually on the phone with the secretary this morning because we were having our biweekly fire update as it happens, and Secretary Bergen was on that call too. We had, I think, 7 senators because this is a moment, obviously, of deep peril in the West, as it is every summer. And for us, this is life and death. The implementation of these bureaucratic choices is not philosophical. At the end of the day, it's can we preserve the American West, and can we preserve our way of life? Can we preserve our drainages and the headland and the water that we all rely upon? So for us, none of this is trivial. None of this is about politics. And I would just finish by saying that the reorg that you guys are talking about with respect to fire generally, that has to be something that there are deep consultations on. Today we had a discussion with the Interior Secretary and with the Agriculture Secretary about the importance of thinking about how we're doing fire mitigation, how we're doing forest restoration, that this isn't just about fighting fires, it's about the entire landscape. And I know John Hoeven knows this well from his work as governor, and what you do before a fire happens and what you do on the back end of a fire. I hope we'll use this as an opportunity to try to think as deeply as we can about this, because we may never get another chance.
Well, Senator, I'm with you on that. And obviously, just as Brooke wants to work with you, I want to work with you on this because this is something we can't afford to get wrong. And I would just point out to you, I know you've probably read the memorandum, but in the memorandum, it notes that one of the instructions from the Secretary is that as we go forward with this reorganization, after consultation with Congress, we're going to do so in a way that does not interfere with the Forest Service during forest fire season. They are going to be left to do their job, and they will move when it's safe for them to do so. And as I noted in response to your questions, we took in particular account the Forest Service needs, and in particular its aviation needs, with regard to our selections of Salt Lake City, Utah, and Fort Collins, Colorado, as two of our 5 USDA hubs.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Hyde-Smith.
Thank you very much, and I certainly appreciate you appearing today. You're doing a great job. I just want to be very clear that I support the efforts to make the Department of Agriculture more efficiency and fiscally sustainable and responsive to farmers and producers, including making the USDA operate closer to the people it serves. I support taking a thorough look at USDA operations in Washington, D.C. area and across the country to correct inefficiencies and to restore fiscal responsibility. I applaud you, Mr. Deputy Secretary, and the Secretary for reviewing departmental operations to ensure USDA is carrying out its missions in a responsible manner, and I think you're doing exactly that. However, there's still many questions that need to be answered on the specifics of the reorganization proposal, so I'm glad I understand that, things are still open and nothing's final yet, but it's a work in process. Page 3 of the Secretary's memo that was made public last week states that the Agricultural Research Service will eliminate its area offices, and residual functions will be performed by its Office of National Programs. I have concerns about the implication that this section may have for agricultural research, specifically with the work being done in Stoneville, Mississippi, that I think you're familiar with, which is home to the Agriculture Research Service Southeast Area Office. Stoneville is the largest agricultural research location in the Southeast and one of the largest for ARS. It's located in the Mississippi Delta, where it remains close to thousands of farmers, producers, key stakeholders, and customers, which is a key pillar for the USDA reorganization proposal. This location provides careers, expertise, and economic opportunity in that area that struggles with poverty for generations. The Southeast Area Office and the Area Administrative Office staff provide leadership, opportunity, accountability, and administrative support services to all USDA research units across the Southeast region. This includes 27 research locations in Mississippi, Alabama, Arkansas, Louisiana, Tennessee, Georgia, Florida, North Carolina, South Carolina, Puerto Rico, and the Virgin Islands, often in partnership with our land-grant universities. This involves 60 research units, 1,500 employees, including nearly 500 scientists, and a $358 million annual budget. The Southeast Area Office is critical to the success of the research programs covering everything from insect management research, warm water aquaculture research, which is very big in Mississippi, crop genetics, and water resource management. The area office staff understands the research being conducted in the region and supports the area scientists located at the various research units throughout the Southeast. This allows for dedicated resources to work on challenges unique to agriculture in the Southeast. Stoneville, located in a low-cost area, already operates as a host center for federal employees. In addition, other federal agencies, including the NRCS, IRS, the DOI, have employees housed in that Whitten Center there. The center has the capacity to house other agency employees in research programs with quality office and lab space, which can be utilized as part of this reorganization proposal. The area office operations budget of approximately $9.9 million will no longer be managed at Stoneville if the area office is eliminated. This will have a negative effect on the local economy in Mississippi if employees are reassigned to other states. To me, this runs counter to the goal of moving USDA staff outside of Washington, D.C., and getting them closer to the department's customer base. I could go on for days talking about how valuable the Southeast Area Office in Stoneville, Mississippi is to USDA, agriculture research, and our ability to remain a global leader in agriculture. Mr. Deputy Secretary, what assurances can you provide me that any proposal finalized by USDA will not negatively impact the Stoneville ARS facility, its employees, or the important work that's being done there?
Well, Senator, I thank you for the question, and your passion for the center in Stoneville shines through in it. First of all, let me make a distinction that may not have been clear in my earlier remarks. The fact that the Secretary's memorandum indicates that we are removing a level of middle management between the people on the ground who actually do the work and the people who ultimately are responsible for overseeing it does not mean that automatically everyone who's located in a former regional office of an agency will be moved. And with respect to Stoneville, because of the important research that is actually conducted there, I believe at the current time, USDA's plan, subject of course to consultation with you, is for the staff to remain there.
Thank you very much for your answer.
Senator Smith.
Thank you, Senator Hoeven. Mr. Vaden, I'm going to follow up on the questions that my friend just asked regarding ARS facilities. We have two of them in Minnesota, as you no doubt know. One of them is in St. Paul, conducts research into cereal disease, plant science, and soil and water management. And of course, you probably also know that earlier this year that those lab researchers in St. Paul were laid off and then rehired. There's also a lab in Morris, Minnesota that focuses on soil and water conservation. That lab has 15 full-time vacancies right now due to the current Trump administration's force reductions and lack of hiring. So my first question is, what is the administration's plans for these two ARS facilities in Minnesota? What's your plan for keeping them going, staffing, and letting them do their work?
I appreciate the question, Senator. With regard to the staffing levels at those individual facilities in Minnesota, I'll have to get back with you on that. But with regard to the labs themselves, as I noted in the beginning, as a result of the Secretary's plan and the President's budget, which is currently pending before the Congress, 90 of 94 ARS labs will be untouched. The labs that you have mentioned in the state of Minnesota are among the 90 of 94 ARS labs that will remain untouched by this reorganization.
Thank you. When I spoke with you during your confirmation hearing, you and I had a conversation about the importance of tribal relations and the trust and treaty responsibilities that the federal government has to tribal nations. And as we both know also, the USDA doesn't have the best track record when it comes to working with tribes. So let me ask you, could you describe what tribal consultation you have undertaken so far with this reorganization? And what are your plans for that tribal consultation?
Well, we intend during the consultation period that has begun to hear from all of our stakeholders, including tribes. And I hope you took note of the fact that in the Secretary's memorandum, although it has not received as much attention as certain other parts of the memorandum, we note that we are going to consolidate tribal relations functions within mission areas and ensure that our Office of Tribal Relations delivers all statutorily required functions. And the reason that we want to do this is similar to the reason that we're wanting to consolidate civil rights functions at USDA. Historically, as you well know, there have been inequities between agencies in terms of how these communities are dealt with and the equality of service they get from USDA. And we believe that by consolidating these functions, we can truly ensure that all tribal members receive the same level of service that they deserve, regardless of which agency within USDA they are dealing with.
So I'll look forward to following up with you on that. And if you'll allow me, tribal nations are not another constituency of the USDA. We have a government-to-government relationship with tribal nations, and so in that sense, it's different. Though, I mean, in no sense any disrespect to the important constituencies that the USDA has. Mr. Vaden, there's a huge interest in Minnesota in the work that the USDA does around rural development. This has been an area that I've spent a lot of time working on. And I want to, in the short time I have left, I'm a little concerned about what is in this reorganization plan or what isn't in this reorganization plan regarding what the administration's plans are for rural development. So can you tell me, does the administration commit to maintaining rural development as a USDA mission area rather than having it get farmed out to other agencies across the federal government? And what is your plan for keeping rural development state offices?
Senator, rural development is very personal to me. As you and I know, when I came before you for my confirmation hearing, I live in rural America. That's where I go home to. I have seen, as you have seen in the state of Minnesota over the past many decades, where towns that used to have multiple factories, including my own, have lost those in recent years. You have a committed champion in rural development at USDA and Secretary Rollins and myself. When it comes to our state-level offices for our rural development, the county offices I believe you referred to, there is a reason why they're not mentioned in the memorandum. That is because they are unaffected by this memorandum.
Do you expect those regional offices, those local offices, to stay as they are right now?
Senator, we are going to leave the county-level footprint alone as a result of this memorandum, and that not only goes for rural development, I want to be clear, it also goes for the Farm Services Agency.
Just yesterday, the Banking Committee, where I served, passed unanimously out of committee a significant piece of housing legislation. And included in that legislation is a bill that Senator Rounds and I from South Dakota have worked on to make important improvements and reforms to the rural housing service so that we can preserve rural housing in communities. This is over 400,000 units of rural housing across the country. I constantly hear about the challenges of staffing shortages and technology challenges in rural housing service, which makes it very difficult for the agency to actually function and operate effectively, and our bill addresses this. So I want to just mention this to you because as the Secretary and the agency moves forward, we've made an important first step with passing this legislation out of banking housing. Now I hope that we can move it through the Senate floor and through the House and get the President's signature. As I said, it's 100 unanimous passage out of Banking Housing Committee. I hope that we can continue to work on that. Thank you. I'm sorry I went over time, Mr. Chair.
Senator Tuberville.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Vaden, thanks for being here, and thanks for what you're trying to do. Increasing government efficiency, reducing unnecessary spending. We're $37 trillion in debt, and we need to look after our hardworking farmers and producers, our foresters. We've already lost 150,000 farms in the last few years, 25,000 farmers. Suicide rate is out the roof. We're losing. In the last profession I was in, you lose and you get your ass fired real quick, and we're losing. Our farmers are, I mean, they're in trouble. Even if they make a profit this year, we're still going to lose thousands of farms. And we're going to find out really how quick we're going to need farmers and producers when all this happens. So our buildings are falling apart. We're in debt. We need expensive repairs. Do we have any estimates how much money this is going to cost the federal government and American taxpayers, you know, through the USDA of moving people around? I know that we do have some good structures, but have we looked into any of that at all?
We do have an estimate, Senator, regarding how much at a minimum we expect to save once costs are taken into account. And that's approximately $4 billion. How did we get to that number? We got to that number by looking into account the headcount reductions as a result of the deferred resignation program. Those alone will save the Department of Agriculture approximately $1.9 billion net. You've mentioned the state of our buildings, and you are unfortunately correct. particularly when it comes to the National Capital Region, and you're looking at the 4 buildings that the Secretary's memorandum proposes to vacate, the value of the deferred maintenance on those buildings, the liability on USDA, is $2.2 billion with a B dollars. Hard to conceive, but that is the calculation when you add those 4 buildings together of how much maintenance they need to bring them up to modern standards. And so when you add those 2 sums together of expected savings, you're starting out with more than $4 billion. And that is before we take into account the lower cost of living for employees, the lower lease rates that we will have to pay in the 5 hubs. Of course, the full value of that we'll only know when the plan is finalized after consultation with Congress. But we start out at a baseline of $4 billion worth of savings.
So you obviously did your due diligence on housing in some of these new locations. You feel good about that, about the amount that it will cut the cost of living for a lot of these young people, hopefully, that we get in the USDA?
We do, Senator. As a matter of fact, if you take a look at the Federal Reserve Board's data, which, of course, as you know, they analyze large regions of the country, typically not necessarily individual states. Washington, D.C. falls into the Northeast region for the Federal Reserve Bank. According to the Federal Reserve, the average price of a home, the median price of a home in the Northeast region is more than $800,000. What, according to the Federal Reserve, is the median price of a home in the Midwest, where we're sending many of our employees? It's less than half that.
Yeah, thank you. Talking about the nutrition and sending more people back into the states to help with that, my future plans obviously is trying to get back into the state government and help in that area. Our error rates in a lot of our states are awful, absolutely awful, and we want to get ours down in the state of Alabama too. Do you think this will help be able to get error rates down to a point where we can survive, and make sure we feed the right people and help the right people that need it, other than the people that's sitting on the couch and watching TV?
I do, Senator. As I noted in response to an earlier question, of course, the Food and Nutrition Service, they'll have employees in Washington, D.C. in either the Whitten or Yates building going forward under the Secretary's plan. But as we shift more people into the field who are focused on the states and focused on the regions of the country that we serve, that means more people for individuals in Alabama and every other state to reach out to help with technical assistance and whatever other advice and counsel that we can offer, best practices, what have you, to get those error rates down so that states can come into compliance with the new bill that Congress has passed.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Welsh.
Thank you very much. Thank you. First of all, I actually do support as much local engagement, local leadership as possible. I've introduced legislation on FEMA to push much more of the decision-making, much more of the authority back to the local communities that are invested in making things work. All right, so I believe more local leadership, less Washington-centered leadership is important. But let me be candid. So I have some inclination to be supportive of folks being back home, closer to where they're serving. The concern I have is whether the reorganization plan is on the level, whether it's about empowering local communities or it's about decimating the already severely cut back workforce. And that's the tone of what my questions will be about. In Vermont, we've lost 78 staff members already, and our local USDA is terrific. They're responsive. We call them, they give us an answer, they help us, right? That's what happens to you guys. We lost 78 people. So how am I going to get excited about this so-called reorganization plan where folks are going back, but we've already lost 78? So tell me why I should be confident about this.
Well, Senator, to use your phrase, this plan is on the level. The Secretary and I are both serious. Employees who accept their new locations, they've got a job, and we've got an office for them, and we're planning a new home for them in a location where their federal salary will go farther.
But here's what doesn't make sense to me. If you believe in the local control, why do you fire local people?
Senator, if you're referring to the deferred resignation plan, those were voluntary decisions made by individual employees who chose, with the information that the agency provided to them, to seek a new career
I'm
elsewhere.
going to interrupt you here because we're going to have a little bit of a disagreement on that. You know, in talking to a lot of federal workers, they felt the axe was coming down and they had to make a choice between two really terrible things. Get fired, get one of those notices that people get, and they then are escorted out of the building within 5 minutes. My stepdaughter, or daughter-in-law, got that over at USAID, or take the buyout. So that doesn't satisfy me. And again, we've got 78 people who wanted to stay on their jobs by and large, and we're doing a good job and would answer the phone when I called, and they're gone. So try to reassure me concretely about how this works out for the benefit of local folks and farmers who depend on USDA.
Well, Senator, with regard to your concerns about terminations, I would point you to the language of the memorandum. The memorandum puts a thumb on the scale against future rifts. As a matter of fact, the memorandum's terms specifically note that there can be no rifts under this reorganization unless it is personally approved by me. With regard to...
I'm going to interrupt. I don't want to cut you off, but you know what my concern is.
I do.
I'd like to be able to follow up because
do.
I want this in the real world to be beneficial for folks in Vermont, for our farmers who are incredibly valuable citizens. The other question I have is about the balance between the commodity farming interests and concerns that many of our members on this committee have, because that's the farming in their region, and like the vegetable farmers or the dairy farmers. And I've been working for years in trying to get more support for those local farming enterprises that are suitable for the state that I live in. And my concern is an imbalance here, and I'm not going to be arguing about taking anything from our commodity folks, but I want more for folks with vegetable farms, farm to school, organic farms, and I don't see that priority as being important in what I've seen from the Department of Agriculture so far. Can you address that?
Sure. Let me make 2 points in regard to that. First, this reorganization plan as proposed by the Secretary is not meant to preferentially advantage or disadvantage any particular sector of agriculture. Second, I know Senator Schiff, who just came in, shares your concerns about whether USDA cares as much about specialty crop farmers, I know you mentioned dairy farmers, as they do others. Speaking for myself, I do. We want all farmers, traditional, organic, specialty crop, commodity crop, to make a profit and to do well. And if there are things that we can do better, if there are ideas that you have about how we can serve your constituents better, or if there are programmatic ideas we can provide technical assistance on, please call me.
Well, I will call you, and what it really does come down to is resource allocation, because that is the reflection of the decision of Congress as to where the priority is. And it's really essential to a lot of farmers that their non-commodity orientation be respected and be supported and be encouraged. So thank you very much.
Senator Marshall.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Vaden, welcome. Glad you're here today. In your testimony, you were mentioning some of the advantages of moving to some of these communities, and I would just point out that you failed to mention that moving to Kansas City, that suddenly you would have the advantage of being a Chiefs fan, rather than suffering through another year here with the Washington Commanders. You failed to mention you'd be within an hour of the most storied basketball program in the nation, and just barely 2 hours away from the first land-grant university in America. And I just would want to give you a chance to talk a little bit more. You think about the Kansas City Metro, within 2-hour drive of the Iowa State University, the Nebraska University, Missouri, Arkansas, how far? Auburn? How far away is Auburn? Not too far. 35 miles. Anyway, so my point is, you can't coach talent. You can't coach talent. You have to have talent. And within just miles of there are some of the greatest ag research in the world. How important is that to American agriculture to have, let alone the affordability issues you mentioned?
It's vital, and I want to add to the mix NBAF. We haven't forgot about that. You haven't either. I know there's some unfinished business left there, but when you think about the potential that facility has and the technology and level of research that can go on there that are vital for the future of American agriculture, you've pointed to many of the reasons why Kansas City also joined as one of our 5 hubs. The department put some thought into this. We want to spark that level of collaboration that you have noted, whether it be with our land grant and non-land grant university partners, whether it be with individual farmers, whether it be with the local chamber of commerce in an area that is driven and motivated, even though it may be in an urban setting, by agriculture. I know that you're well aware that the Federal Reserve has a location in Kansas City, and that when we're looking at the shape of the agricultural economy for inclusion in the Beige Book, we look to what the Kansas City Fed has to say. Yep. USDA will be able to take advantage of all of these synergies in not only Kansas City, but the other hubs that we have laid out.
Over the past 4 years, it was reported that only 6% of USDA employees were in the office as well, and more, just a crescendo of complaints from my ag producers back home, that they could work with their local FSA officer or their conservation officer, but then that report would get somehow clogged here in D.C. I want to compliment the White House, the $10 billion that was appropriated in spring within days. Within days, my farmers had the help that they needed. And then more recently, I think it was a $16 billion. So something is working right from a standpoint of customer services. And I just can't help but think when you have people working for USDA out there going to church, going to the soccer match, all those type of thing with the local farmers and ranchers is going to be a better service as well. So just talk about customer service, how that is going to be impacted by these people, the net moving out into the hinterlands, as we call it.
Well, I don't consider it the hinterlands. I consider it home, Senator. But with regard to having more people in the field, we agree with you that we think the level of service will improve. Not only do we agree with you, even if we had a disagreement, the Congress has legislated on this point. And this is another matter that drove our consideration of this plan, and that's looking at USDA's reorganization authority, which was granted to us by the Congress in 1953. And if you actually look at the statute, I'm a former judge, so I tend to look at statutes. What does the statute say? The statute says, in carrying out this law, quote, the Secretary shall seek to simplify and make efficient the operation of the Department of Agriculture to place the administration of farm programs close to the state and local levels, close quote from the statute. Yep. This is exactly what Congress intended, the maximum amount of USDA resources dedicated out in the field, not in Washington, D.C.
Yeah. And I just want to make one last point. President Trump's tariffs are working. He has made incredible trade deals that are going to open up markets that we've never had access before. We've never sold a cheeseburger in all of Europe. Ethanol, 40% of our corn crop goes to ethanol. Suddenly EU, UK, all these countries are going to be buying ethanol as well. We're seeing manufacturing jobs move back to this country because of these tariffs as well. American agriculture will benefit significantly for long-term trade agreements, for long-term success as well, and we can't wait to see what's next coming out of the White House and the tariffs. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Mr. Chairman, before our next senator asks questions, I just wanted to put on the record 2 letters. I'll put a pin in my disagreements with Senator Marshall on the tariffs. But first of all, the National Association of Forest Service Retirees sent you and I a letter opposing the reorganization of the Forest Service, saying it would decimate the ability of the Forest Service to deliver services and conduct research. Second letter, American Federation of Government Employees, which represents many of these USDA employees. They sent a letter to you and me opposing the reorganization due to the impact on the workforce and asking for an impact assessment and cost-benefit analysis.
Without objection. Let's see, Senator Lujan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, farmers and ranchers back in New Mexico have told me that these tariffs feel like a gut punch. Everything's getting more expensive for them. Implements getting more expensive, fertilizer getting more expensive. I mean, heck, I don't know how many of you buy ground beef. I do. If you go buy it now, compared to the prices that you saw just a little bit of time ago. I mean, anyhow, that's not what I'm here to talk about today. I thought it was important to mention that, though. Mr. Vaden, Secretary Rowland's memo proposes effectively eliminating the U.S. Forest 9 regional offices over the next year. As you know, the Forest Service's Southwest Regional Office is located in New Mexico. Now, what I'm hoping is that we get some information shared with the employees in all parts of America where they're going to be impacted by this plan, including the 250 employees at the office. I want them to be prepared. Mr. Vaden, what will eliminating the regional office in Albuquerque mean for the employees there?
Well, Senator, let me first of all point out that with regard to the Forest Service employees in Albuquerque, Albuquerque is specifically mentioned in the Secretary's memorandum because of its important HR functions. That is a core area of the Forest Service that will be unaffected by this reorganization.
So, Mr. Vaden, it's going to stay open?
No, Senator.
Okay, well, then let's get on to the employees, please.
No,
Just
Senator,
let's fast forward.
The HR function will be there.
Okay.
The regional office will no longer be there.
Okay, what does that mean to the employees?
Those employees may be absorbed into other areas in Albuquerque or may be asked to move pending consultation with the employees and the agencies. But I also think it's important to note, because I want to respond to the question that you sent to the Department of Agriculture just the other day, that you asked about the lease at the building at 333 Broadway Street Southeast. And so I thought you would want to know that that building has long been on the GSA priority list for closure, and its lease is set to end on the 31st of December, 2026.
I appreciate that, Mr.
This
Vaden. If I have limited time, sir.
reorganization
Mr.
plan is
Vaden,
part to take into account
Mr. Chairman,
of
can I get some
reality.
help here? Mr. Vaden, I have limited time here. We sent you those questions so you could respond in writing. You chose not to do that, so maybe now you will. So I hope that you just respond to these questions in writing. That's why we sent them to you ahead of time.
That question was not a part of the letter that Senator Klobuchar sent.
You just said I sent you a letter. I just
No,
sent you some
you sent an
questions.
inquiry.
Anyhow, I'm not
Mr.
gonna
Chairman,
get
if you
back
could
and
give
forth.
Senator Lujan extra time, and one letter is not all we need here when we had no consultation. Senator Lujan has every right to send his own letter.
Mr. Vaden, what does it mean to the employees? Have they been consulted?
Senator, the employee consultation begins now, and as I mentioned,
When's now? Today?
it began the day that the memorandum was issued.
So have the employees in Albuquerque been consulted?
They will be consulted through their union members.
So it started, but they've not been consulted yet. So we'll get, I'd like to ask Mr. Chairman if we need to send a formal letter when the consultation in New Mexico will truly begin with the employees. Now, based on the Secretary's memorandum, it's not clear if the center is going to be closed or relocated. That's why we're asking this particular question. The administration needs to provide more details about this reorganization plan and how proposed changes will impact wildfire response. A lot of these questions may not even have to be asked today if our staff's questions would have been answered as opposed to ignored. So when will you, on behalf of the Department of Agriculture, provide this information to this committee?
Senator, we've already had multiple staff meetings. We'll intend to continue those over the next 30-day consultation.
Mr. Vaden, I'll try to be more clear. I'm sorry if my English is spoken with an accent. I apologize. I'm proud to be born and raised in New Mexico. I'll try to speak more clearly. When will you provide this information to this committee?
Senator, we will get it to you. You send us your questions, you'll get.
I'm asking you right now. When will you provide this information on the reorganization plan to this committee, to the members, to those of us that are duly elected to be here?
As
When?
we finalize it, you will.
Is it not finalized?
Senator, as I noted in my opening remarks, this is a vision to be implemented. The individual details will need to be worked out with the agencies and the employees.
Let me ask the
And
question a different
obviously,
way.
that involves consultation with you.
Mr. Vaden, when will you provide the existing information about the reorganization plan to this committee and to the members?
The existing information is contained in the memorandum. If you want background data regarding how some of these decisions were made, we're happy to work with you on.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that. We're on the same page there. Now, Mr. Vaden, one thing I've been hearing from folks back home around SNAP and WIC is we're seeing an all-out assault on these food programs. 1 in 4 Americans rely on programs to eat, as we all know. The administration's attempting to gut the specialized workforce that ensures these programs are operating effectively and efficiently. Now, I read the Secretary's memorandum that was released on the 24th, Now, the questions I'm getting from people back in New Mexico is that they're already struggling to get timely technical assistance needed to effectively administer WIC to the mothers and kids back home. When has the department conducted an analysis of how this program, this proposed reorganization will impact the ability of Americans to access federal nutrition assistance programs?
By sending more people into the states and having fewer people in Washington, D.C., we will have more employees, including in the Food and Nutrition Service, closer and more available to our state partners to provide.
Again, Mr. Vaden, if I could just be clear, did you all conduct the analysis of how it's going to impact the ability to feed folks?
Senator, as part of our plan, our entire effort was to increase government.
Mr. Vaden, I appreciate that, sir. Did you conduct analysis? Has analysis been conducted, yes or no?
Yes. we
Okay,
know that
my
by
question
putting
is,
more
when will...
employees in the field, we will get better results.
I appreciate that. You can submit that all in writing as well. When will you commit to sharing the analysis with this committee?
Senator, will work with you following the hearing.
A week, a month? If it already exists, it could be here tonight.
Senator, with regard to the analysis in each specific agency,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Senator Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Secretary, for your attendance here today. I appreciate that you answered our chairman's call to come before this committee and be here in a fairly short manner. You may recall during your confirmation process, you and I discussed the potential benefits of relocation of USDA, and I shared that I thought Nebraska would be a great location for parts of the agency with a cheaper cost of living, a workforce where agriculture is ingrained in our culture, and high-quality educational institutions. So ultimately, I would have liked to see a process that allowed for Nebraska to demonstrate its strong value proposition. So while I do agree with the overreaching goal here, I have to express disappointment in how this has been rolled out and the lack of engagement with Congress prior to the announcement. And I also agree with Senator Hoeven that to accomplish a major reorganization, Congress will need to be a partner to provide resources and perhaps additional authorities. And I hope you will commit that moving forward, USDA will be proactive in engagement with this committee and also with the Appropriations Committee.
well, Senator, as I noted in my opening remarks, the Secretary's memorandum was the first step, not the final step. It was essentially the green flag, not the checkered flag. And so now what we're entered into is a 30-day statutorily required period, having given notice to you of our intentions to reorganize the department, to hear from you. As Senator Hoeven noted, he's coming to meet with me later today, and I thank him, actually, since I'm spending some time up here today with him, for him coming down to see me in my office in the Witten Building. And I'll be happy to meet with other members of this committee who have similar concerns, ideas, efficiencies that they want to share with us so we can make our plan better.
Thank you. I'd like to start now with a few questions to understand some of the impacts to some of the assets, USDA assets that we have in my state of Nebraska. We are home to several USDA research facilities, and that includes the U.S. Meat Animal Research Center that conducts research that is strongly supported by our livestock industry, and a new ARS facility co-located at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln that's focused on innovative precision agriculture research for which construction has started. With the reorganization effort, can you verify that neither of these ARS facilities will be impacted?
Senator, I can, and I'm surprised you left out the NRCS soil.
Oh, I was going to get to that.
Survey Center in Lincoln. All of those facilities are unimpacted. As you probably remember from my opening remarks, 90 of 94 ARS research facilities unimpacted by this memorandum. That includes all of the facilities in Lincoln, and for that matter, the rest of Nebraska. And you may have noticed in the Secretary's memorandum that while the individual facilities were not called out by name, Lincoln, Nebraska was, and I'm here to confirm that that was the intent of putting that in there to signal that those facilities, for the reasons you have noted, are important and are part of the 90 of 94 ARS facilities, which will be untouched.
More broadly, as you go through this reorganization effort, what thought have you given to address any outstanding facility improvements that may be needed at these research centers? So basically, I'm asking you, what commitment do you have to these centers in the future?
Well, the budget is a number that Congress gives us. And obviously, for every dollar that we save, that gives us the opportunity, if Congress allows us, to reallocate those funds toward facilities we intend to keep. So I'm excited about the fact that the Secretary's plan calls for us to save at least $2.2 billion by ditching these National Capital Region facilities that are out of date and in disrepair. And we're happy to work with the Congress if, as a result of those savings, there are other facilities that you think are worthy of investment with those monies.
Thank you. I'm sure we will be in touch in conjunction with the university. Thank you.
Senator Warnock has something to do, so I think Senator Schiff, you're going to allow him to precede you. So, Senator Warnock.
Thank you, Chair Bozeman, and thank you, Senator Schiff. Mr. Vaden, last week, without notice to the members of this committee, Secretary Rollins announced this mass reorganization, and now you're here in response to the chairman's call. And what I'd like to know is whether this plan will disrupt the lives of everyday Georgians who depend on USDA's programs. These are folks I talk to, obviously, all the time, and what USDA does or doesn't do, how it's able to deliver matters to farmers and families in Georgia. I'm proud to have secured $21 billion for farmers and rural communities in Georgia devastated by Hurricane Helene and other disasters. And I'm glad to see applications for some of this funding are finally opening up. But we are already at the beginning of what could be a very rough hurricane season. I've seen firsthand the devastation that these hurricanes can bring. Are USDA staff who administer disaster funding affected by this reorg?
Senator, our intent and the Secretary's memorandum is that for these frontline facing positions, whether it be the people who do our normal commodity programs or who are involved in the disaster relief programs, that their efforts not be affected by this reorganization.
Well, do you expect that part of USDA to see some downsizing of staff?
Senator, we have made a commitment that if employees go with us to these new locations, they've got a job and we're planning to have an office for them there. That's what we're planning for. Now, whether every employee will voluntarily decide to come with us, I don't know.
So a relocation for a family is a big deal.
It is.
What do you think will happen?
Senator, I think actually a large number of them will choose to come. I think many of them will choose to come because given cuts made by other federal agencies here in Washington, D.C., the job market isn't what it once was here. And I think that the exciting opportunity these new hubs provide for them to actually be able to own a home affordably and grow and expand their family with the lower cost of living, that's one of the primary reasons we chose each of these 5 hubs, will attract them to come.
So you don't expect a significant reduction in staff as a result of the reorganization?
It's hard for me to predict how many will. Do I think 100% will say yes and relocate? No, Senator, that would not be realistic for me to say that. But I think a significant percent, more than a majority, will choose to come.
What are your plans? What are your plans to ensure that this reorganization does not continue to delay the rollout of these critical funds that farmers need in the wake of these disasters?
Well, Senator, FSA is hard at work on that. I've had meetings, even though I'm only 3 weeks on the job, about the next phases of that rollout. You may have seen I participated with Secretary Rollins in the release of some of those funds my very first week on the job. You have my word that that is first and foremost in our mind. We are aware that the farm economy is not strong right now. Producers need these funds as quickly as possible, and we're going to get them out.
Will you review the impact of the reorganization plan and then report back to this committee without us having to call you? Will you report back to the committee regarding whether or not it's working?
Absolutely. And by the way, I don't know whether you were in here when I mentioned it for some of the other senators. If so, I apologize for repeating myself. But if you have ideas about how we can reorganize better, or if there are particular things in Georgia that you want to draw our attention to, we're happy to meet with you. I hope you saw in the memorandum that Athens, Georgia, though it is not a hub that we have selected, will play an important role in USDA going forward. The Forest Service, as you know, already has some significant assets in Athens, Georgia, and we actually intend to build on those as a part of our reorganization and are working with the southern region of the Forest Service and the current regional forester there in transitioning USDA's assets for the Forest Service, which are so important for the eastern region of the country, to the Athens location.
In the first Trump administration, USDA relocated the National Institute of Food and Agriculture to Kansas City, Missouri. According to a report from the Government Accountability Office, this move resulted in the black staff at this agency declining by 65%. Mr. Vaden, what's your plan to ensure that this reorganization does not disproportionately impact staff of a particular demographic?
Senator, we're going to treat everyone equally, make certain everyone has the information. And as you're probably aware, you and Congress have generously granted to the agencies the ability to provide relocation assistance when things like this do happen. And of course, employees who decide to make that move are eligible for this relocation assistance.
So what's your plan to make sure, because we saw the disproportionate impact in Kansas in that case. So what is your plan to ensure that we don't see this kind of disproportionate impact?
Well, Senator, we want every employee to join with us, regardless of race, gender, or any other characteristic.
But I'm asking.
Do you have ideas on how we can target specific populations to ensure that they see the benefits of the Secretary's plan? I'd like.
Well, to be quite honest with you, I'm deeply suspicious of that because the approach of this administration seems to be to push against any kind of intentional effort to make sure that we don't see disproportionate impact on a whole range of issues. Let me ask you this thing. Yes or no, has the USDA conducted any sort of disparate impact analysis of this reorganization plan to determine if there's any disproportionate harm to any particular groups of staff or farmers?
Not to my knowledge, because the plan has not been finalized.
Will you commit to doing so and sharing the results with this committee?
Senator, we will take into account our civil rights responsibilities in everything we do.
My question is, would you conduct a disproportionate, a disparate impact analysis?
Senator, you have my word that everything we do will not be based on race.
I take that as a no. Thank you very much.
Senator Moran.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Mr. Secretary, thank you for your presence today. I appreciate the chance to be here to hear what you have to say. I am pleased that in 3 weeks on the job, you seem so knowledgeable about the details of the Department of Agriculture. And I express my appreciation for the idea that work by federal employees and work for federal taxpayers and constituents, particularly farmers and ranchers, can be accomplished outside the D.C. area. I've been through this issue with you previously in the earlier administration and was pleased by the decision to have 2 research agencies relocated in Kansas City. I'll leave off the word Missouri in that explanation, but 2 agencies located in Kansas City. And I want to know, do you anticipate in moving any functions of TFAA or FAS outside the District of Columbia?
Senator, I don't want to give a definitive yes or no answer, but as you know, our Trade and Foreign Agricultural Affairs Mission Area, which Congress instructed us to create in the 2018 Farm Bill, is something of a special animal, as most of its focus is actually international rather than domestic. It's basically a diplomatic corps for America's farmers, ranchers, and foresters. And so, given the specific focus of that agency, while I cannot guarantee that there won't be some employee who gets relocated, I think that that agency, when we're looking at what it is we're trying to do, and that agency's focus is international rather than domestic largely, that it might be among the lesser affected mission areas.
Well, Kansas City Commodity Office has historically played a significant role in the function of international food aid programs, particularly Food for Peace. Do you see those functions continuing under this reorganization?
All functions that remain with the Department of Agriculture by statute are unaffected. We cannot, with a reorganization, add to or reduce from the statutory responsibilities Congress has given to the agency.
Do you have any insight into what sub-agencies, if any, could move to Kansas City? Besides ERS and NIFA, Kansas City is also the home to the RMA Compliance Office and the Domestic Inspection Operations Office for the Federal Grain Inspection Service. Thoughts about those?
We don't have finalized lists. I think it's important to know that with regard to RMA, that is an agency where, because of its function, many of the people are already out in the field, and some of them are remote. And they're remote for a reason, not because it became cool 5 years ago, but because their job requires them to be on the road. And this reorganization plan does not affect that.
I also would add, I don't know that I need any comment from you, but I would add that with the move of NIFA and ERS to Kansas City in the first Trump administration, that decision was further confirmed by the actions of Secretary Vilsack. There was efforts at one point in time to try to reverse that decision, which Secretary Vilsack did not do. I do hope that we do better, and presumably the times have changed in regard to COVID, but so many USDA employees have worked remotely. We had this conversation when you were in my office seeking my vote for your nomination's confirmation. And I'm pleased by the efforts that you have described to me then and again today in this hearing about the insistence that federal employees at USDA return to in-person positions. True?
Yes, sir. And one thing I will note of bipartisan agreement during today's hearing is that it appears that members of both sides of the aisle are sick of Teams meetings and teleworking. And we at USDA are definitely on that bandwagon. We want our employees who need to be in the office in the office.
Mr. Secretary, thank you. You mentioned in your earlier comments about NBAF to Senator Marshall. Would you further explore with me and the committee? You indicated that you recognize some things needed to be done. What do you anticipate that those being, and how do you anticipate to accomplish it?
Well, Senator, I know that I need to take a trip out there in order to see it myself. And I have been summarily briefed on some of the challenges that are currently engaged in NBAF. I have a more in-depth briefing on my calendar after this hearing in the next couple of weeks. And after I've had that briefing, I'd be more than happy to sit down with you and talk specifics.
It is a jewel, a gem. I'd like to visit with you. I'm happy to come to see you. That seems to please you when we make the trip to your office, and I'll do that.
I was just complimenting Senator Hoeven for his extra
I do
effort
not want
of
Senator
coming
Hoeven to receive any additional consideration than I do. I will come, I will come see you. And in addition to talking about relocation, I'd love to have the conversation about NBAF, a project, the National Agro Bioscience Facility that I've been involved in since, I don't know, my days in the House 20-plus years ago. Thank you, sir.
Senator Schiff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Vaden, I won't repeat except to say that I share the bipartisan concerns that have been raised about the creation of this plan without input from impacted entities or the Congress. But one of the chief messages of USDA proposing this is centered around making USDA offices and services moving closer to American farmers. I know this won't surprise you, but California is the #1 ag-producing state in the union, and yet the proposed hub in place of USDA headquarters will be located in Salt Lake City, which is more than 500 miles from the Central Valley. And my understanding is that none of the other 5 top ag-producing states will enjoy the presence of one of these regional hubs. So my question is, why wasn't a hub placed closer to the largest ag-producing state, or frankly, any of the other top 5 agriculture-producing states? Why weren't those selected as venues?
Fair question, Senator. First, I want to note just a simple geographic fact. While there are no hub locations in California itself, nearly all of our hub locations are closer to California than everybody being in Washington, D.C. With regard to your point about why California doesn't have a hub location, the simple answer is cost of living. We were looking at the cost of living for reasons that I noted. We want people to join USDA, to build a career, to be able to purchase a home. The hub locations we chose, Salt Lake City being among, believe it or not, the cheapest cost of living on the list, allow that opportunity. Unfortunately, it's more difficult to do that in California with the price of housing.
There's going to be a huge cost to the relocation of all of these staff, indeed, if staff choose to relocate. In 2019, half of the staff at the 2 agencies that were part of the then reorganization plan did not relocate. The GAO, in addition to the point that Senator Warnock made, also found that there was a tremendous loss of expertise in that relocation, and that the new hires were very junior and lacked the kind of experience that was lost in that relocation. Have you done an estimate of what the expected attrition is? If half the employees didn't relocate, do you expect to lose half of these employees?
I think the Secretary's spoken to that. We expect to have better results this time around, in part because we learned some lessons from ERS and IFA. I mentioned some of those earlier in terms of looking for places focused on cost of living, looking at where we actually already were and had a footprint of USDA employees with whom the new employees could collaborate. And I think that given what we're trying to sell and the fact that, as you acknowledged, we're looking to build the future of USDA, not just maintain the present, these will provide us with the incentives to get these positions.
So what is your estimate of the attrition? If it was 50% in the last reorganization, what percentage?
We don't have a specific number to offer at this time.
Let me raise a broader concern. No regional offices in California. In fact, we are losing in this reorganization an Agriculture Research Service office in California. The $20 billion in disaster relief, that aid includes a broad authority to deliver assistance through block grants to states. Despite California expressing interest and the legislation having no limits, USDA has announced such a narrow set of qualifications that it essentially excludes all but a few states in the Southeast. Moreover, USDA announced it was rescinding all but one regional conservation partnership program awards per state, and then all 6 California awards were canceled. Some of these projects even had the same goals as projects in other states, like my colleague, Senator Fetterman, in Pennsylvania. I hope you can understand, and this is not to denigrate from Pennsylvania, just California would like to enjoy the same thing. And so my question is, all of California's conservation program grants canceled. California doesn't qualify for disaster assistance under the narrow definition. California gets no regional office. California loses one of the existing offices. It's hard not to perceive this as a political calculation rather than one that's in the best interest of farmers, given our dominance in agriculture. What do you have to say to California farmers who are feeling that the administration, the president, is not representing them, that he's punishing them because the state didn't vote for him?
Senator, that's not the case at all. With regard to moving more USDA employees, though not into California, much closer to California than Washington, D.C., our employees will have more ready access to your site. With regard to your notation about the ARS facility, I would note that the proposed closure of it is not a creature of the Secretary's reorganization. It is instead part of the President's budgetary proposal to this body. And of course, I am well aware that Congress holds the power of the purse, and they make the final decision on what will get funded. Finally, with regard to disaster assistance, I know that the first level of the block grant funding that we announced focused on those who had crop insurance and accepting those specialty crop producers who participate in NAP, who are eligible for the current round of block grants. Specialty crops were left out. There is a second tranche that was noted and has yet to be announced that is designed to include so-called shallow losses, which, as you know, are losses that are not covered by crop insurance. So I'd love to talk with you more about that in the future as we move toward rolling out that proposal.
Well, I will take you up on that invitation, but let me just say this. The fact that the California office is being closed as a budgetary decision rather than as a reorganization position does not give Californians any comfort. They just know they're losing an office and losing access. In terms of an office in Utah being only 500 miles away, that is also not much of a comfort to California farmers, particularly when California farmers, I think, if that's the choice, would rather have the experience of the current USDA employees in Washington than an inexperienced group of new employees in Utah. And finally, the proof will be in the pudding. Right now, California grants are canceled. Right now, California doesn't qualify for disaster assistance. And, you know, however that is justified or rationalized, the proof will be whether resources actually get to California farmers, and that's the standard we'll hold the administration to. I thank you, Chairman.
Senator Justice.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Vader. Okay. Now listen, you know, I totally understand that people that are being relocated, it can be a stressful time. I get that completely. But let me just say just this. At one time not long ago, our family farm had grown to a size to where we were probably really close to the biggest cash grain farmers east of the Mississippi River, corn, wheat, and soybeans. So would you not think of all the senators, of all the, I ought to know, I ought to really know what is happening and what's going on because we were farming in multiple states. I ought to really know the pulse of the farmers, the ranchers, the foresters. I ought to know. I mean, for God's sakes of living, of everything in the world that I ought to know about, I ought to know about this. Now, I can tell you without any question that it'd be great if you would have said, well, we're going to build one of these locations in West Virginia. You know, that would be great because we're close to 2/3 of the population of the country, and our cost of living is great, and our people are wonderful, and it would have been great. But here's the whole deal. And here's the thing you've just got to ask, though so easy. Go ask the farmers. And I'm sure you've done exactly that. Go ask the foresters. Go ask the ranchers. One question, is it working? And they'll say, ain't no way. So for God's sakes of living, why in the world do we have to run all over the place with our hair on fire, going completely buck nuts and everything over just simply just this? It's not working. And literally, these people have given us so much it's off the chart. I listened to Coach Tupperfield, and Coach, Coach has a real understanding because he has the pulse of the people. He's right with the people, and he's right with our farmers. Well, there's nobody in the world that could be more with our farmers than I am. So with all that being said, just absolutely just think. These people have given us innovation. They're the most productive people on the planet, and we're losing them. And Coach just said the suicide rate's off the chart. We're losing thousands of farms every year. You're going to lose more this year, right now. With all that being said, what in the world are we trying to pretend to ourselves that absolutely this thing is working and working in D.C. And what you're saying to the world is all we're trying to do is put these people closer to the pulse of what's going on. And we're trying to do it in a way that's equitable in every way, cost of living, you know, great people, great resources, all that stuff. We're trying to do all that. Now look, I'm a white-haired new guy on the block that's done a lot of stuff. And I've done one whale of a lot of just this. Absolutely, I know what's going on in the farm community, the forestry community, our ranching community. I know. And it's high time that we try to do something to reward and help and make easier and everything else for all those people that are busting their you-know-what for all of us every day. Mr. Chairman, I don't have any questions. I don't have a question one. All I'm telling you is we absolutely need to move and do the very best that we can for these great people tomorrow. Anyway, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Thank you. Senator Fetterman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Hi, hello, Mr. Vaden. So now, I'm sure you're aware, you're an expert in part of this industry. You'll probably know that Pennsylvania, that's our largest industry. And now I think we can all agree that, at least in my state, I assume that it's probably nationally, that the vast majority of the parts of my state are very, very red, and they're more aligned with the GOP. And for me, and I think we agree that ag is bipartisan, and that's the way I approach this kind of a thing. So often, you know, I'm advocating the kinds of parts in Pennsylvania that just they're maybe not going to vote for me, because I think it's an incredibly difficult job to be a farmer, and I revere and what they do for our nation. And today, though, I'm here to express my concern, because I today am as the voice for the unions that are really, really concerned based by your choice to relocate for me. And that's why I really wanted to bring up. And you know, there really wasn't, you know, I'm concerned there really wasn't any negotiation or anything that with the unions for this in advance for that. When ERAs and NIFA were relocated in 2019, workers were promised relocation expenses and incentives. I actually have the signed agreement between them and the union outlining these relocation incentives, and I ask unanimous consent that it be entered into the record. And I do believe the department walked back a little bit on this promise. And Mr. Vaden, I'm asking, are you willing to commit to covering all the relocation expenses for the USDA staff who choose to move or are forced, because this is part of the plan?
Senator, Congress has a cap that they have put by statute. Senator, Congress has a cap that they have put by statute on the maximum amount of relocation assistance that we can provide. However, within that range, we do have quite a lot of flexibility, and as I mentioned earlier in the hearing, it is our intent to cover these employees' expenses within the bounds set by Congress.
No, thank you. That's a great answer. Okay, and Mr. Vaden, I appreciate the department being available for a staff briefing yesterday. I just really want to make sure that the voice of the union here is, and I really want to have more and to commit to more union engagement through all this. And I would like to invite you so that to help facilitate meetings with the union leaders and those other members to be more a part of this process. I assume that you are open to that.
Absolutely.
Okay. Okay, and now, in my last minute, I'm going to, are you familiar with the spotty lanternfly?
Yes, sir. As a matter of fact, I saw some in Washington, D.C. last week, sadly.
Yes, oh yeah. I love stomping them.
You know, I'm a great Pennsylvanian and a great American. Wherever I see them, it's like stomp it, stomp it, stomp it.
Well, you'll be glad to know that I did some of that myself down near city center, so.
Yeah, no, and of course, I mean, that's really concerned about that invasive species. And we want to make sure, it seems like now you're aware of it, you know, can we ensure that Pennsylvania farmers from the lanternfly control programs won't be interrupted?
Senator, as part of the Secretary's reorganization proposal, it specifically notes the importance of ensuring that nothing interferes with the important work APHIS does, whether we're looking at New World screwworm, or whether we're looking at the spotted lanternfly, or whether we're looking at a future threat to come. And everything that we do will be implemented in a way that does not affect APHIS's important work in this area. And the final point that I would note on that is nearly all of the people who are involved in battling these invasive species are already on the front line and not located in Washington, D.C.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Ernst.
Thank you, Chairman Bozeman, for holding this hearing today, and welcome back to the committee, Deputy Secretary Vaden. It's good to have you here. And I'm actually really excited about this hearing and the opportunity. Secretary Vaden, I've spoken with you and Secretary Rollins at length about this issue that we're talking about today. So first, getting our folks back into the office. That has been really important to me. Consolidating or selling off unused office space, and moving USDA closer to those it is meant to serve, which is our farmers and our rural communities. So again, just want to thank you for making this a priority. And as you know, the status quo is forcing taxpayers to foot the bill for billions in deferred maintenance. We don't hear a lot of that talked about, but there's deferred maintenance and there are the ongoing operating costs, all for buildings that are almost entirely empty. And just last week, 78% of the seats in the USDA South building weren't filled. However, this represents a significant improvement from the past number of years. When Secretary Vilsack sat in that very seat that you are sitting in today, a year ago, he denied evidence exposed by the GAO revealing the USDA headquarters building had an 11% utilization rate in 2023. He also said the whistleblower letter that I received, quote, isn't even close to correct, end quote, to the USDA building usage at that time. Well, folks, Secretary Vilsack lied. And thanks to this administration's dedication to transparency, I actually have the data to back that up. In February 2024, as Secretary Vilsack testified before this committee and told us there was nothing to see here, USDA's 3 main Washington, D.C. office buildings had barely over 13% of their seats filled. Unfortunately for taxpayers, USDA isn't the only agency holding on to unaffordable properties that are nearly vacant. This includes nearly 7,700 vacant federal buildings and another 2,200 that are largely empty. And to fix this, the Senate must pass my For Sale Act to dispose of underutilized buildings, including the Ag South building, and to return the money from those sales to the taxpayers. We need more of these agencies to follow Secretary Rollins and USDA's lead. So with that being said, that's a great plug for my For Sale Act. But Deputy Secretary Vaden, I find it interesting. We really haven't heard any outrage from our colleagues when it comes to the Biden administration, when they kept USDA's workforce almost entirely remote and our offices sat empty. Yet now we're starting to hear all of those concerns about relocating positions into the very communities that USDA is supposed to serve. So my question, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, and can you expand on the main factors that led to the USDA to consolidate offices in the D.C. region and move those positions to the other states?
Well, Senator, first let me thank you for your leadership on this issue, because you were focusing on telework, the inefficiencies it created, and the vastly empty government buildings that dot the District of Columbia before it was cool. So thank you for doing that. Like you, I got a chuckle when I read the letter that was sent to me Monday night with the concerns expressed about meetings only done by telework and who's going to be at the department manning the store. As you well know, that was the Biden administration. That was USDA for the past 4 years. Drive by the Witten building, drive by the South building. The parking lots were empty. Here in the Trump administration, we want people in the office. But as you've noted, even when we've got all of our employees in the office, we're still not reaching the congressionally mandated threshold of 60% occupancy. That's not a high bar. That still leaves 40% vacant. And with regard to the South building, on high attendance Sunday, they used to call it at my church, we hit 36.9%.
That's the high mark.
That's barely half of what Congress has mandated that building should hold, which again is only 60% in order for us to keep it. And so what drove our consideration was fairness to the taxpayer, asking them, can we really expect them to foot the bill for a building that is largely empty? And obviously in the executive branch, we are charged with carrying out the laws that Congress passed. You made your intent incredibly clear when you passed the Use It Act by a vote of 97-1 in the United States Senate, and we are following it.
And I'm so thankful for that. And I am glad that we're actually going through this exercise now to move more of our folks out to the people that they should be serving, our farmers and our rural communities. And I am going to also add to the record, Senator Marshall was talking about Kansas State University being the first land grant institution. I will note that Iowa was the first state to accept the Morrill Act of 1862, which established our land grant universities. But Iowa State University was the first institution to open its doors to co-ed students. Thank you. Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you. And thank you again, Deputy Secretary Vaden, for your time and insight today. And again, doing this on very, very short notice. The hearing record will remain open for 5 business days, and that concludes our hearing, and it's now adjourned.